So while creating projects, there might be requirements where we need an in-memory database. So in this tutorial, we are going to see how can we use Spring Beans to create in-memory database. And the in-memory database that we would be using here is HSQL. So in order to start, let's create a listener, HTTP listener, and configure this. Let's create a configuration for this, listening at port 8085, and the base path for time being I'll keep it as blank. Now to configure Spring Beans, we need a configuration element called as spring config. Here it is, a spring config, but to get this we need to add a few dependencies in pom.xml. So this is the module that needs to be added so as to get this configuration spring config. So now that we have it in place, it's showing a list of required libraries, and I have added all the libraries in my pom.xml. So I'll have to give the location of name of the file, XML file, where I have written the bean definitions. So I'll write it as beans.xml and hit on OK. Before moving ahead, I would like to show a few dependencies that I've added in pom.xml. So I've added shared libraries. The shared libraries include all the Spring related libraries as well as the Spring JPA and Hibernate ORM along with an HSQL, and then we have the related dependencies present in the pom.xml. So you have to paste all these dependencies in order to be able to use this HSQL. Now that my spring config has been configured, but it needs bean.xml, so I'll have to add a bean.xml. So in resources, I'll be adding new file beans.xml. So in interest of time, I'll be copying and pasting the bean.xml which I already have with me. Let me explain. So in this bean.xml, I'll be using transaction manager, JPA transaction manager. I would be initializing this. So this in turn uses entity manager factory. So I have a definition of entity manager factory wherein I am specifying the data source, the package to scan, which I will be creating in a moment, and the JPA vendor adapter. And then I am specifying an embedded data source, which is HSQL, which has been referred over here. So now that I have mentioned the component scan to scan com.spring test package, I'll just go to main Java and create a package named com.spring. That's the name, spring test.test. Now let's create an entity named as employee. I'll mention this as entity. I will import persistence.entity. I'll create three fields: integer, employee ID, string, employee name, and city. Create setters and getters for this, and the employee ID would be the primary key, so I'll decorate it with an ID annotation. Then we need an interface which would extend JPA repository, so I'll create an employee repository, which would extend JPA repository, and this JPA repository takes in the object, that is the table employee, and the ID. The ID is of type integer, so I'll put it as integer. So this is the table and this is the primary key type, that is it is an integer type. Now next I would create class. Okay, and I forgot to add a repository annotation. This would act as a repository so that Spring identifies while loading. Repository. Now I'll add a component, name this class as setup. This will initialize the database with some values, so I'll decorate it as component, and auto wire employee repository en, and then create a method initialize db. Employee dot set employee ID 1 dot set city. I'll create two employees, and I'll process this employee to the database using the employee repository save method e1 and dot save e2. So this method should run while the application gets deployed. So I'll add post construct, and this would initialize the database with the default values so that we can use a get request to get all these values. Now that we have this in place and we have mentioned in beans.xml to scan for this package, we are good to go. But now we need to create a database config, so I'll drag and drop select palette, select palette. I'll configure I'll copy HSQL dependency. I will use this. Let's create this. Select generic connection, configure, add a Maven dependency. So this dependency gets added, and since this is an in-mem database, the URL would be jdbc colon hsql db colon main, and since we have mentioned the database name as data source in beans.xml, I'll use data source, and the driver class name is org.jdb hsql db dot jdbc driver. Let's test the connection. Okay, there's some error over here. IDs for this class must be manually assigned before calling save. Okay, let's check for a moment. Okay. Employee ID. Okay, so there's a mistake we have used even. Let's try with two. Now it should work. Okay, let's test the connection now. Okay, so the connection is successful. Now I'll write a select query. I'll select all the employees. Select star from employee, and I would like to add a transform so that it gets converted into JSON and gets sent back to the client. So, transform, I'll change it to JSON and send back a payload. So still some time. I think we are good. Let's run this project. Save. Okay, so now that the app is deployed, let's try to hit the service and check if you're getting the expected output. Post 5 forward slash. So here we have the output and it's working fine. Employee name even and employee name are odd. So now what we can do is we can also persist the data. So I'll use another listener add it. Insert and let's configure this insert. It's already using the database config, and I'll insert into employee. Okay, insert into employee values. First is employee emp id, then we have emp name, and then we have its city, right? Yeah, id name and city. id name and city. Okay, and let me fix the input parameters. Let me map emp id to, I'll send a payload, and I'll map this with payload dot id, then emp name, payload dot name, and city as payload dot city. So that's it, all done. We've added the values. Now once this is done, let me add a logger. Code inserted successfully, and set this listener to paths as, I'll enter a path as create. It's going to create an employee. Should get automatically updated. Okay, now let's try to hit using a post. This post I'll enter as create body as JSON, ID as 3, name as city as, let's try to hit. Okay, so the records have been inserted successfully, and you can see there is an object coming back to us. So in order to ensure to check the record has been inserted, let me try a get request again, which will display the list of all the employees, and hit on send, and there we have the third employee has been inserted. So this is how we can use an in-memory database using Mule. Thanks for watching.